The Seahawks have a new 8-player draft class that will be hitting the practice field for the first time at the end of this week at rookie minicamp. Which one of these players have the best chances to contribute immediately for the Seahawks? We're going to be diving in our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there. Thanks for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're down listening in Glendale, Arizona, in Cardinals country, or across the country listening in Portland, Maine, we really appreciate each and every one of you. We are now getting close to the rookie minicamp for the Seahawks Friday and Saturday this week. The rookies will be descending on the VMAC, their first chance to work out with Mike McDonald and the coaching staff. Leading up to that, we're going to discuss which players in this draft class have the best chance to contribute early for the Seahawks, particularly on offense and defense. We're going to tackle your mailbag questions as well, plus a close look at defensive free agents for the Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Monopoly Go. I have to admit, I've got a very competitive side, and that competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Life comes at you fast in the NFL. The NFL draft just wrapped up on Saturday. Undrafted rookies quickly getting signed to rosters. And oh, by the way, the Seahawks will be hitting the practice field with their rookies and tryout players on Friday and Saturday. So before you know it, it's going to be OTAs, and then it's going to be training camp, preseason, and then the start of the regular season. This is going to be a blur for the next couple of months, and we're going to be jump-starting that process now, getting our first look at the incoming draft class. And Rob, you and I, we've gotten a lot of questions the last few days about different players in this draft class, whether or not they'll be able to play early, and that got us wondering, which players from this class have the best chance to be immediate contributors? And maybe there'll be a little bit of difference in our opinions on this, but I think I know one thing that we are absolutely going to agree on. There is one player that clearly stands out as a plug-and-play player from this class compared to the rest of his draft peers.
Well, I think that you have to just kind of focus in on the third round selection of Christian. I mean, he is. When you look at what he is able to do at UConn and the fact that he was able to go to the Senior Bowl and also dominate there as well, then Christian Haynes, just his size, his physicality, his agility, that the fact that it is an area of concern for the Seahawks, I think that's where you have to start the conversation off is a Christian Haynes. And that might surprise some people considering that he was selected number 81 overall as opposed to Byron Murphy selected at number 16, obviously. But at the same time, I really think that's where you have to start the conversation. Look, I believe in Anthony Bradford at the right guard position. I also believe in the signing of Lincoln Tomlinson at left guard. But I think that Christian Haynes is very much going to push for starting reps regardless of which side. I think that everything about him screams immediate impact player for the Seahawks at a position of concern. So I think you can make an argument that it might be Byron Murphy II. I mean, again, obviously he is a very talented football player, but I think you have to ask yourself, well, where is that starting possibility for him? Are you going to bench Leonard Williams? Are you going to bench, Draymond Jones? Are you going to bench Jaron Reed? Are you going to bench Jonathan Hankins, the most traditional nose guard that's on the squad as far as a veteran? And so that is why I think that at least for the two of us, that we are arguing that Christian Haynes, the number 81 overall selection, actually might have a better route to significant playing time, perhaps even starting time, than even Seattle's first round selection.
I'm making the prediction right now. I think Christian Haynes is in the starting lineup in week 1, whoever the Seahawks opponent is. Now, I don't know which guard spot it's going to be. I'm confident that he could slide to the left side. This is a really high IQ player that has a polished skill set. So to me, this was an easy selection for him to be the most pro ready and have the best situation to be able to get in the lineup. And I think Byron Murphy II starting, that's going to be difficult with the veterans he's got here. But I expect he's going to jump right in and get a lot of snaps. He's going to play a significant role on that defensive line rotation. Now, as far as who I've got next on the list, I think A.J. Barner could be the number 2 tight end sooner rather than later. I mean, Pharaoh Brown's a really good blocking tight end, but going back and watching Michigan, I mean, A.J. Barner didn't get a lot of opportunities to catch the football, but when he did, you saw some athleticism. You saw some ability to create after the catch, and I almost wonder if he might have a few more opportunities in the NFL because Michigan ran the ball so much. I anticipate he might get a few more bones thrown his way, especially with all the attention on the receivers that Seattle has. And Barner's a really good blocker on top of that. So with his experience coming from Indiana and Michigan, a pro-style offense there, a well-rounded skill set, at minimum, he's going to be a key contributor on special teams. But I could see him playing a lot of snaps at tight end to help replace Will Dissly and Colby Parkinson pretty quickly. So to me, he's number 3. And then after that, I think you have a lot of players muddled together that you could mix and match where I don't know that any of Seattle's other draft picks, maybe Lumea from Utah because he's played a lot of snaps in the Pac-12, but where is he going to go? If you have Christian Haynes, you have Laken Tomlinson, he's probably going to be a swing guard. I think you look at the rest of this class, you can maybe make arguments for a number of those players that by the end of their rookie season, maybe they'd have a chance to play, but I don't know how the corners are going to be getting in the lineups without injuries in front of them. Tyrese Knight has a lot of ability, but I don't think he's going to be ready to play just yet. On defense, he's mostly going to be a special teams player. And Michael Jarrell, great story, could be a guy that can play down the line, but he's coming from a Division II school. Going into this, he's the least pro-ready of any of Seattle's draft picks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, for me, again, I don't think that it's any kind of a guarantee that Christian Haynes is going to be able to beat Anthony Bradford and Laken Tomlinson. I'm a big fan of Laken Tomlinson. I think that he was brought in for a reason. I think that if the Seahawks are looking for postseason possibilities, and they're going to want to have some consistency along the offensive line. And so I fully expect the starting guards to be Laken Tomlinson at left guard and Anthony Bradford at the right guard position. And Christian Haynes is going to have to earn it. And I think he will, but I don't think that necessarily it's going to be early. And I have a hard time imagining a scenario in which Seattle is going to be rotating offensive linemen early in the season. I think it's going to be similar to what we saw at the center position a year ago, where, Oluwatimi was projected to be the starter and Evan Brown as the veteran just beat him out. Perhaps some of that was due to, injuries and things of that nature. Maybe it's because Pete Carroll is kind of an old school mentality. Who knows? Shane Waldron, same kind of a thing. But still, I think that Byron Murphy is going to, obviously, as the first round selection, is going to be part of the rotation early. It's just so much easier to rotate defensive linemen than it is offensive linemen. And then the other one is going to be the linebacker, in Tyrese Knight. And I know that he is pretty raw. I mean, you made the point on when you joined Ian Furness and I in KGR right as he was selected, that he had played an awful lot on the outside and then is making that transition to the inside. Mike McDonald in the opening press conference after the Seahawks selected Tyrese Knight, and it was a surprising selection, 118 overall, but made the comment that he views Tyrese Knight as more of a weak side linebacker at this point. I personally view him as more of a Mike linebacker when he actually, things slow down a little bit, that he can handle wearing the green dot and all that. I just think that his physical skill set, that's what that projects best as. But again, to me, it's a little bit easier to rotate on the defensive side of the ball than it is on the offensive side of the ball. So again, I think that he has a chance to kind of carve out a little bit of playing time early on. And then there's no question about it, whether it be the tight end A.J. Barner, whether it be the two-headed monster that is the Auburn cornerbacks, whether it be Tyrese Knight, special teams really is where it's going to come down to. And again, because Jay Harbaugh, obviously Seattle's special teams coach, has such familiarity with A.J. Barner, that is really where I think you're going to see the biggest impact immediately of the day 3 players is, again, on special teams. So they're not really starters that a lot of fans are going to recognize, but I do think that that's where you're going to see a lot of the rookies make their hay early on.
And we could see Nehemiah Pritchett win the kickoff return job.
Good.
He has 4.36 speed, legitimate burner. He has experience returning kickoffs previously at Auburn. And DJ James, I don't see him being a return man, but I could see him being a really good specialist on kick and punt coverage, going down and smacking people and maybe being a gunner on their punt coverage. So there are roles to be had for these rookies. I just think there's only a couple of them that really are going to have a great chance early to be playing on offense or defense. If you're looking for a sleeper, maybe it is somebody like a Tyrese Knight, because he clearly can rack up tackles. And if he catches on quicker than expected, he's got 2 veterans on 1-year deals in front of him. If Mike McDonald thinks that he's more ready than everyone else does, maybe we'll see him get some sub-package action. But a lot of these guys, it's going to start with special teams and trying to develop them so that down the road they can play significant snaps for the Seahawks on offense or defense. When we come back, we're going to tackle your questions on a Tuesday mailbag. Tons of questions from our valued listeners. We'll get to those here in a moment on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Monopoly Go. I have been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores. I'm putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I am finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. There are hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to my favorite, the Moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. You can charge rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly, or you can go after the Monopoly money of your counterparts by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part of the leaderboards, when you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. That's hilarious, seeing other people go bankrupt. Not in real life, but in the game. So get to yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store and on Google Play. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad as always to be joined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s that are listening in. Make sure to check out yesterday. We had Corey Allen, the head coach from Findlay, who coached Michael Jarrell with the Oilers. Awesome interview. Really great coach that's done a phenomenal job with that program. Might have a few more NFL guys coming down the pipeline as well. Make sure to check out that interview on our Locked On Seahawks YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcast. It's time for our Tuesday mailbag. We didn't get to it yesterday because, well, we were just coming off the draft and we had a ton of players to break down, but we got a lot of fun questions here from our valued listeners. And Rob, our first one here coming from Seahawks 778, who benefits the most with the addition of Byron Murphy II?
That's an interesting question. Benefits the most? I would think the Seahawks offense, because they got a playmaker on defense here who I think is going to just basically give the ball back to the Seahawks on offense. This is a club that has struggled so much on the defensive side of the ball in terms of run defense. And look, Byron Murphy II did not create as many pass breakups at the line of scrimmage or forced fumbles as his quick twitch would suggest. But I do think that is something that Mike McDonald and his staff is going to be able to kind of coax out of him. So who benefits the most? I think that, again, it's going to be the Seahawks on offense, the Seahawks fans, the entire Seahawks community, because I do think that this is a player that has a great deal of upside and he is only going to get better.
I'm going to answer this real quick. I think it's the edge rushers. Anytime that you have a guy that's that dynamic in the interior, can create that quick of pressure, the pocket collapses and then your edges, it's easier for them to squeeze down and you can really play swarm football. And of course, the secondary guys as well. If you're speeding up the clock for the quarterback with interior pressure, it's a lot easier to cover on the back end. So I think there's certainly some players, but as you said, the fans are going to benefit watching this kid play. He's got an exciting brand of football. Next question here. What is your guys' spidey sense on the prospects for post-draft trades for Seattle? Are we set for 2024? This coming from Catman Did on X. Look, I know fans out there are wanting there to be a move, and we know John Schneider in the past, he's been willing to do this. The Seahawks do need to open up some cap space. Right now, negative $1.3 million in effective cap space when you include the rookie draft class. So there's going to need to be some moves made, but No, the Seahawks are not trading DK Metcalf. They're not trading Tyler Lockett. If there's going to be a deal at some point, it might be that end of training camp trade that we've seen John Schneider make quite a bit. I don't see trades, any significant ones at least, leading up to the season. I just don't see it happening. Our next question here for Rob. What do you think Jack Westover's chances are to make the 53-man roster? This coming from X-Ray_Bird.
Good. I think that, again, we've talked about Jack Westover so many times, Corbin. I think that his agility, his soft hands, he is a player that I really believe has the ability to be a much better NFL player than he ever was in college. I think he was just kind of, as I mentioned before with Byron Murphy, just kind of scratching the surface at University of Washington this past season. He caught 4 touchdowns. He was arguably University of Washington's most clutch receiver. Obviously, Roma Dunze wound up going number 9 overall. I mean, he was their clutch receiver. But anybody who watched the Huskies this past season knows Jack Westover made so many clutch receptions, and he's a former basketball player. So, again, I think that he has a good chance. Seattle's primary tight ends are basically already established, but I do think that spot for an H-back role is something that we know that Ryan Grubb has featured in the past, and I think that Jack Westover is as good as anybody that Seattle currently has on their roster.
Our next question coming from Alex H81050 on X. Cameron Young was very solid and promising last season, but is he the odd man out to make the roster with how much depth our D-line has now? I'm not going to jump to that conclusion right now that Cameron Young doesn't have a roster spot, because if you look at Baltimore's defense the last few years with Mike McDonald as the defensive coordinator, they didn't just have one big-bodied guy. He likes to have at least 2 true nose tackles on the roster. They did bring in Jonathan Hankins, but he's on a 1-year deal. He's getting to be an older player. Cameron Young could still be a long-term factor for the Seahawks at the nose tackle spot. So I don't think the additions that they have made, I mean, remember, really the only big additions they've had, they drafted Murphy and they signed Hankins. Otherwise, this is the same line. They just re-signed Leonard Williams on a 3-year deal. I still think there's a spot for him on the depth chart, and there's still the potential for him to be a really solid nose tackle. There were flashes last year. Even a few times he was able to get some pressure on quarterbacks, which is something he very rarely did at Mississippi State. So I think there's upside there. At the same time, he's going to be learning from Jonathan Hankins, and he's going to need to add a little bit more mass to his frame if he wants to play that nose tackle spot. But Mike McDonald has a history of having at least 2 of those big-bodied guys. I think that bodes well for Cameron Young's chances to stick on this roster. Rob's going to be excited about this next question coming from Morelli in Spain here on X. Do you think the Seahawks see Kobe Bryant as a legitimate safety for this year?
I do believe that they view Kobe Bryant as a safety. I think that his versatility, his ball skills, his route anticipation has always projected better at the safety position. I also know that the Seahawks remain very, very high on Jarek Reed II. And so, and obviously they brought in the free agents that they did in Kayvon Wallace and, now I'm spacing on his name.
Rayshawn Jenkins.
Exactly, Rayshawn Jenkins. And so, and you have the returning Pro Bowler in Julian Love. So again, I think that is a likely scenario for Kobe Bryant, but at the same time, I also don't think that it is a given. I gotta go back for a moment. I'm sorry, Corbin. You mentioned that with Cameron Young. To me, an earlier question that was asked about how is Seattle going to basically be able to trade away or kind of get under the salary cap, to me, that question puts a lot of focus squarely on Jarek Reed. Jarek Reed is a guy that John Schneider has a great deal of affinity, a great deal of respect for. I don't know that Mike McDonald does. I know that Pete Carroll did previously. And again, Cameron Young is a player who is young, inexpensive, and still on the upside. As you mentioned, this is a defensive line that basically was retained and still finished 31st in all of the NFL. Look, I'm a big Jarran Reed fan, but I also think that, again, one position that the Seahawks have to try to just kind of squeeze in under the cap and squeeze in terms of their roster is going to be along the defensive line, and it's going to be along at cornerback. Those are two of the bigger positional groups that this club currently has. And so that is a positional group that I think that we have to kind of be keeping an eye on. If some of these young players are able to show much of anything, then some of the veterans who are getting some decent dollars, that might be an area that Seattle is looking to drop a little bit to get underneath the salary cap.
And Kobe Bryant could be a candidate at the end of training camp for one of those late August trades that we've seen John Schneider make, if they're able to get some good film of him playing safety, because you just threw out 4 names, because I think we're going to see Jarran Reed, the second back, fairly quickly. I mean, John Schneider was not completely sold on him being ready for the start of the season, but the last that I heard is he's trending towards being ready for training camp. Right. So if they have all 4 of those players, where do you put Kobe Bryant? Because they've drafted 2 corners who now have their entire rookie contract. You've already got 2 years gone on the rookie deal for Kobe Bryant. Didn't play a lot last year. I don't know where he fits in. Maybe he's able to come back this year and push for playing time at safety, but he's got a lot of bodies in front of him in both those positions. So he might be a guy who potentially could be on the block, and they're just trying to get some good film so they can see if they can get a late round pick for him. Our last question is staying at the safety position. BS Papa 360 on X. What do you think of the likelihood of the Seahawks bringing back Jamal Adams? And do you think Mike McDonald would keep him at safety or use him more as a linebacker? If you would have asked me this question before the draft, I would have said 1.1%. I said very little chance. But since Seattle did not draft a safety, and looking at their undrafted free agent signings, we'll look at the specifics here in a bit, that was a position that they didn't touch. And I don't see DJ James or Nehemiah Pritchett playing safety in the NFL. No. They've got some long-term question marks there with a number of their veterans at that position being free agents next year. I don't see Jamal Adams coming back playing safety, but I'm going to say 50% right now. And the reason that I'm saying that, the linebacker that you drafted, Tyrese Knight, might not be ready to play very many snaps, if any, on defense. You've got 2 players in Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker who are solid players, but if you're looking for somebody that can create havoc as a blitzer, I still think Jamal Adams can offer that to you. If he is willing to return in more of a situational role as kind of a pass rushing hybrid linebacker, I think it makes a ton of sense. And it's a chance for him to get healthy and really restore some of his value to go into free agency in 2025. So there are other teams I've been told that are kicking the tires on Jamal Adams. I don't know if he comes back, but I'm going to say 50-50 right now, just because the fact is the Seahawks have talked to him. There have been discussions, and not drafting his safety, only picking 1 linebacker in the draft. He could fill a number of needs as a situational player that still could offer them something as long as the money lines up. And this goes back to your salary cap stuff as well. But I think that it is a possibility now, which a week ago, I probably wouldn't have been sold at all on this possibility. With the way the draft unfolded and the things that John Schneider has said, very easily could return to Seattle just in a far different role than what they anticipated when they traded for him back in 2020. When we return here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks, we're going to take a look at the reported undrafted free agent signings on defense, including Nelson Caesar from Houston. Don't go away. We will be right back. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is almost a full month into the season already. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Do you think Connor McDavid has a hat trick brewing? Is Aaron Judge going to smack 2 home runs for the Yankees tonight? Does Anthony Edwards have another 3-point rampage? Encore on tap in the second round of the NBA playoffs. You can bet on it all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s out there tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks set to open their rookie minicamp on Friday, and there's going to be a number of undrafted free agent signings that will be out on the field with Seattle's 8 draft picks, as well as some tryout players. Yesterday, Rob, we looked at the offensive signings that have been reported. We've got a handful of defensive players that we can confirm through a team source have been signed by the Seahawks. They've yet to release them on their website, but a handful of players. And I know there's one in particular that jumps out to both of us just from the standpoint that Nelson Caesar was a playmaker at Houston. We're talking about a guy that had 9.5 sacks and 13 tackles for loss last year. 6'3", 254 pounds. He plays with a relentless motor. He's really powerful for 254 pounds. This is a guy that some people expected was going to get drafted. He slipped through, didn't get picked, and now he goes to Seattle, which if they're going to be running a hybrid 3-4, that would be the best scheme fit for this kid.
No, it definitely is. As you said, I mean, he's kind of a power-packed player. He is a guy that has a stubby frame, is physical, and that is not something that we often have been able to say about some of Seattle's edge rushers. And so he can not only get upfield and create a little bit of pressure on the quarterback, he also can set the edge. So I think that he is somebody that's interesting. The Easton Gibbs, linebacker from Wyoming, has some flashes as well. He's a very productive player, a guy that I'm certainly intrigued by. And again, as we just mentioned, the linebacker is enough of a concern that, hell, there's a lot of people out there who think that Jamal Adams might be looking to change positions and be used in that regard. But I'm going to mention a player that is actually not on that list. And that's because when he signed with the University of Tennessee, he was a JUCO cornerback that went to the Vols and became a wide receiver. And actually, I'm not even going to focus in on either the wide receiver or the cornerback play, because I would argue those are Seattle's 2 deepest positions. But Corbin, now for the last several weeks, I've been pounding the table that Seattle has to get not only a kick returner, but a punt returner. And in my opinion, the best returner on their roster at this point is a guy that I can't even confirm at this point actually signed a deal or if just going to come in as on a free agent basis to make this club. But he's going to. And his name is D. Williams. He is the best returner on this roster. He bounces off of contact. He has the straight line speed. He is the player that I think that the Seahawks fans right now should be learning and hearing his name. D. Williams from Tennessee, to me, is the undrafted free agent. Look, there's a lot of talent on the offensive side. We just talked about Jack Westover, for example. But D. Williams is the one that I am most excited to see in terms of the minicamp. And when he makes that minicamp roster, then winds up going to training camp. That's the one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that is a name that I cannot confirm is signed to the Seahawks either. Now, they do have a couple roster spots that have yet to be filled. I believe right now they're at 88 players on the roster with the reported signings that I've been able to confirm. And there's always a chance that one of those ends up being rebuffed because sometimes players at the last minute say, wait, I got a better opportunity from the Titans, for example. So I'm going to go take that and go to their rookie minicamp. I think there's a better chance for me to make that team. We have seen that happen pretty much every year. So we'll see what happens. But Williams is an explosive returner. And you and I both know, especially with the new kickoff rules that are being catered to increase the number of returns and create more drama in what used to be one of the best plays in football before some of the recent changes rules-wise. They're going to be looking for anybody they can to make that an elite part of their football team. And so they brought in Laviska Shenault. They re-signed D. Eskridge on a restructured deal. But if you can bring in somebody like Williams as an undrafted rookie on a cheap contract, and he ends up being your best kick returner, that's a huge win for you. And it justifies keeping a roster spot with these new adjusted rules. One other player that I want to talk about real quick, going to the cornerback position, Carlton Johnson from Fresno State. And one of the things that jumps out to me here, most of these players on this list, we at least don't have any reported links in the pre-draft process. Carlton Johnson had a top 30 visit with the Seattle Seahawks. Kind of a tall, lean corner, doesn't have the longest arms, had decent production last year, though, for the Bulldogs. And we're talking about a guy with legitimate 4.3 speed. Like, this guy can fly. So could this be another player that can find a way onto the roster with some special teams value? It's going to be impossible at the cornerback spot with him drafting 2 corners. But again, if Johnson can come in and show, hey, I actually can return some kicks with my speed, That is another name to keep an eye on. And as a developmental player in the practice squad, the Seahawks have had success there. They could maybe be looking for another corner to add next year with all the players set to hit free agency. Johnson is a name I at least would keep an eye on that could create some buzz with his speed and his playmaking ability.
Yeah, no question about it. Carlton Johnson is the other player I was going to mention here. I mean, my wife graduated from Fresno State. I have been a huge fan of the Fresno State Bulldogs, just program going back to the Pat Hill days. Carlton Johnson, as you said, he's got a lean build, but he's got 4.3 speed. The same things that intrigued the Seahawks about the two Auburn corners, I think is also going to intrigue them about Carlton Johnson. I expected him to get drafted. I was stunned that he fell out. Considering his athletic traits. Again, I think that he is going to be somebody who's going to have to make this club on special teams. He is going to have to show a little bit more consistency as an open field tackler and perhaps as a return man. But yes, I think that Carlton Johnson is absolutely one of the players that I am most intrigued by as far as Seattle's defensive free agents.
One other fun fact that I want to throw out here, the defensive tackle from SMU, Devere Levelston. I'm going to be frank with you, Rob, not a guy that I have seen play. I did not do any extensive research on him during the pre-draft process. However, he was a high school teammate of Byron Murphy II, the first-round pick. So he's going to get a chance to rekindle that time as a teammate here in Seattle. Now, with the depth they've got there, that's going to be an extremely difficult position for any undrafted player to be able to crack the roster. But it's a cool story to see him get the opportunity to sign with the Seahawks and be able to play with his former teammate as a current teammate in the Pacific Northwest. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks wherever you listen to podcasts. YouTube, audio, on iTunes, wherever you listen, so you don't miss a single episode. When we come back for our Wednesday show, we're going to be looking at which players benefited the most from this year's draft class and which players might want to be looking over their shoulders because there's extra competition that's been added to the roster at their position. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.